Hello, everyone. I hope you are having a wonderful weekend, and I think might be weather is also all right at your place. So, beginning on with today's speaker session, we have Raja with us. Raja is a product manager. He has more than half a decade of experience in product management, and he has worked with CRED um, and many companies like it. He has experience in building both B2B and B2C products. Um, not waiting further, over to you, Raja. Raja, I think your mic is on mute.
Sorry, folks. Hey, everyone. Good morning. Sorry, there's some issue in my network. I hope everybody can listen to me.
Yeah, you are audible.
Hello.
Yes, you are audible.
Hey, Sadik. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Raja.
Okay. Sorry. Hey, very good morning, folks. Raja, Satik said I'm into product management for over half a decade, right? So currently working at CRED and previously Razorpay and Wondered before that, and in somewhere in between, I started my own startup on developer experience, right? Uh, so Satvik, before we start on, do you want to set the format of the meet? Like how do we proceed on this?
Yeah, sure.
Sure. So first, I would go through the product-led growth as a topic today, right? So we'll see how do we contribute to a growth of a company using product as a main dimension to grow a company, right? And then we'll also open up for EMA, right? But I'm also flexible in having chat or let's say questions on chat as and when it's required, right? So we can also do that. Cool. I think we can start now, right? Sadhu? Hello.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So let's just go to the topic, right? So product-led growth, right? So what are the things that you would be learning today, right? Mostly, it would be around, what would be the fundamentals of product-led growth? What's the definition, right? What are some of the examples, right? And what could be some of the strategies that an org should implement at an org level to have product-led growth, right? And how do we leverage analytics, right, to drive growth? Obviously, if you don't measure something, you can't improve, right? So at last, we'll also look at some of the best practices or its tactics some orgs are actually follow to implement product growth, right? So I'll just deep dive into the fundamentals of product growth, right? So uh, product growth is centered around making the product very effective in nature rather than the size of the org, right? So what product growth basically specifies is that key product itself would basically kind of drive the customer acquisition, retention, expansion, right? So the main emphasis is on creating self-serve products rather than driven by customer support or let's say CSMs or let's say onboarding tools or assisted onboarding tools, right? So if you take off examples in B2B products, you could have seen most US-based products, right, or support-based products are mostly self-serve in nature, right, where you don't need a customer support or account manager for you to kind of sign up a particular product, right? If it comes to B2C, obviously it is very well, I mean, I would say unsaid rule that the interface should be very self-explanatory so that the user need not have any user onboarding assistance, right, to basically use the product itself, right? So if the user is finding it difficult to look at a product and use a product, then there is no point of developing product altogether, right? So that's what the emphasis on, to basically have a customer centric and self-serve product, right? Um, some of the principles, right, for product-led growth, right? So broadly, we can say it could come under customer-centric approach. So basically, put your user at the center, right, and be in your shoes of the customer and see how would the user use the product, right? So uh, it would be like you would be the customer of the product, and it's kind of dog coding, right? So what would be you doing with the product if you're in customer shoes, right? Uh, Self-serve product experience, right? So uh, again, iterating on the previous point, the product has to be intuitive enough for any user to use it, right? Without needing an extensive support, right? So and there are ways that we could actually ask users to explore, or let's say find value in our own features, but that has to be entirely self-serve rather than having an FAQ or it's a bot explaining the features, right? Viral loops and network effects, right? So obviously, marketing is one thing a company does, right? So until unless the product is effective and the product is solving a core problem, right, it wouldn't actually kind of grow in the market. So one effective marketing strategy is, as everybody would know, word of mouth, right? So until unless you create a really seamless product with good customer experience and having a good problem to solve, the word of mouth would not be your marketing strategy, right? So it's one of, I would say, very difficult marketing strategy to crack. Reason being, it's not paid, right? And it has to come from the customer's heart rather than any paid promotion, right? So yeah, let's just jump on to some of the examples, right? So many of you know Dropbox. Maybe it was, let's say, highlighting for 3-4 years back, not right now. But Drop was one of the first companies to have freemium model, right? With a slightly nuanced layer of having some sort of free capacity, right? Um, to basically kind of help the users, right, to use a product to a certain extent, and then kind of have the users refer their external friends or let's say family to basically kind of gain traction, let's say have user acquisition, right? So in a way used, but having a cap in terms of how good you can use a product, right? Um, so next, if we look at Slack, Slack, I think, as everybody would know, kind of helps in collaborating between teams, right? In terms of instant messaging, or let's say, even having a quick jam with team members or etc. Right? The two good things that we can measure, or let's say we can see in Slack, is that it's entirely self-serve, right? It's very easy to use and easy to understand.
Hi,
Right?
Raja.
And they also offer
Raja,
a
can you hear
free
me?
trial, right? Yeah. Yeah, I can hear you.
Raja, if you could just switch off your video, maybe you have network bandwidth issue.
Okay.
So the voice is breaking a lot. So if you could just switch off your
Yeah.
video and then continue with the session.
Yeah, I'll do that. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Good. I think if we continue from where I stopped, we already have seen like how the Slack has grown, right? Very organically, competing with really big players out there in the world, right? Comparing with MS Teams and other instant, or let's say collaborative messaging tools, right? Even Skype for that matter, right? So those are kind of very good examples of product-led growth. Now let's just look at some of the strategies for implementing a product-led growth model, right? So now, before we, I mean, there are two kinds of companies, right? Companies which are starting from scratch and companies which are starting, or let's say already has started, but in a certain phase right now, right? So how do we enable a certain company which is at a growth stage to transition into product-led growth, right? So some of the steps is basically, you kind of try to understand the target. Way to do that is basically to conduct user research, gather feedback, and identify pain points, right? Second, I would say is basically design and develop a sales or product. The reason being key, we can't be with each and every customer, right? To try and talk to them about the product and navigate through the product, right? So, and it doesn't obviously scale with number of users, right? One example could be offer a free trial or a premium version, right? So that we could actually the users could basically experience the value before committing to a purchase, right? So the third, I would say, is basically defining the metrics, the success metrics, right? Or let's say it could be activation rate or retention or its expansion, right? You would know based on the metrics that are the users finding it a
Raja,
value
your
prop,
voice,
right? Or the users
Raja,
are able
can
to
you hear me?
successfully sign up to your. I can hear
Hi,
you,
Raja.
yeah.
Yeah, your voice is actually not coming out properly. If you could
Okay.
connect to your
I'll try to
phone, maybe.
disconnect.
Are you connected to your Wi-Fi? Maybe because of that, it's creating some issue. It's coming out very, very robotic. So if you could connect through your phone, and then let's do a mic test. Then I think we will be good to go.
Is my voice clear now?
Yes, it is clear.
Okay. Sorry, folks. Really for the trouble. I think the last strategy that we should also look at the step, right? To not only, I mean, most of these initiatives are being driven by the product leadership, right? Of a particular team, but it's also important for everybody, also the stakeholders of the company to align with us, right? So until unless we do that, we'll actually face a roadblock on each and every step, right? So it's also important for other departments or other stakeholders to know the value prop of product-led growth, right? And there are a lot of examples in the world which actually kind of use product-led growth as a mechanism and kind of made their product successful, right? So again, steps is one part, but it's also has to be embedded within the culture of a company, right? So the importance of cross-functional collaboration, right? So where does product contribute, right? So where does marketing contribute? Where does sales contribute, right? So how does customer success team can enable product growth, right? Until unless we show the value proposition of product-led growth, I don't think teams could basically work together and basically come to a consensus saying that we should actually kind of make product at center and then drive the growth rather than depending on marketing and promotions, right? One very good example for that is basically in terms of B2B products. There are teams like customer success teams, right, who are in constant touch with the clients, right? Now, these customer success teams can actually enable product growth more than a product manager because they're more close to the customer and having frequent meetings in terms of configuring the product or let's say defining the use cases for a client, right? If a product manager can gel with customer success team, right, in a really good way, they could basically act as an input for you to define your roadmap, understand customer pain points, right? And how does the customer feel about your product, right? If a customer success team has to spend their time in configuring and understanding the product to a user, then that's where the cue lies in that we haven't developed the product in a way that it should be, right? That's one of the examples, right? So what are the techniques, right? Obviously it's not very easy to basically get a buy-in from stakeholders, right? So what are some of the techniques that we should actually use to get buy-in from stakeholders, right? So obviously one would be to educate stakeholders, right, by proposing the value proposition. right?
Raja, can we go a little slow because people are unable to understand what is the agenda or what is the session going on. So if you could check the chat box, people are not able to get along with you. So if you could just slow down a little bit and set the agenda once again and just go elaborate more on each slide, I think that would help people a lot in
Yeah,
understanding session. Yeah.
definitely. Yeah, got it. Sorry, I didn't get you.
I said that if you could just elaborate on each slide a little bit more and a little raised voice because not able to actually understand thoroughly what you are mentioning. So if you could just do these few things and check the chat box once, people
Sure,
have mentioned that
definitely.
they are
Do
not able
that.
to go along. Yeah.
Got it. Just a second. Cool. So I'll just go a little bit slow. Sorry for the fast pace. I think that's what I'm
Yes, there was some glitch from Raja's end, so he has dropped off, but he will be joining in a minute and then we'll begin the session. Sorry for the inconvenience.
I think I got disconnected.
No issues, Raja. We can just resume with the agenda and then we can start.
Hey, folks. Sorry. Is my screen visible now? Am I audible?
Yes, yes, you are audible.
Okay. So, yeah. So we were talking about tactics for product-led growth, right? So self-serve being one of the key driver for many companies in the world, right? So one good example that I can give is about Trello, right? The reason I took Trello is basically I think most of the product managers in the world would use Jira or let's say any project management tools, right? Uh, Having an established player like Jira, right? Coming up with one more project management tool is very difficult for anybody to crack, right? And Trello has done that in a very intuitive way, right? And also has a very self-serve onboarding, right? Zero or Confluence or let's say Atlassian for that matter, right? Or kind of complicated, or need an admin to kind of, help you get started with your day-to-day tasks, right? So Trello could be one such good example over here, right? Uh, Next comes, how do we leverage product analytics to drive growth, right? So I'll just take a pause here, right? So I just wanted to see, what's the comfort level that we're at before deep diving on product-led growth. Any questions that I can take, Sathik, on this?
Yes. So we have a Q&A question, but I don't think it is on PLG, but we can take it anyway. Let's push it to the end of the session. Let's push this question to the end of the session. You can check in the chat window
Sure.
for the audience.
Got it. I missed one question. So since I rejoined, I just couldn't see that message again. So if anybody
Okay.
has any, can you
Yes,
please?
yes, sure. So
Sure.
like I think the audience is wants a little bit slow explanation of the concepts.
Sure.
So I think, yeah, that would be all.
Got it.
Okay,
So
okay.
let's come to another objective, right? So how do we leverage product analytics to drive growth, right? So now there are multiple ways that we can measure a product, right? So it could be metrics that track users. It could be metrics that actually track business health, right? It could be metrics that also, measure a product performance, right? In order for PLG to work, we should also focus on product analytics, right? Now, how do we arrive at certain product metrics, right? So which kind of enable product growth, right? So first and foremost is basically understanding the user behavior, right? And identifying opportunities, right? So what do I mean by that? So we can just look at, how users actually are interacting with the product, right? Identify the pain points, right? And areas of improvement, right? So one example for that would be, just try tracking user journeys, right? For, let's say, any of the funnels that you want to track across the app. If we take an example, let's say Swiggy, a food ordering app. Now, as a product manager of, let's say, responsible for food menu, or let's say, restaurant detail page, right? You should look at metrics such as, how much amount of a time a user spends scrolling through the menu, right? And how much amount of time a user spends in searching through a menu of a particular restaurant, right? Or how many amount of times a user spends in, let's say, browsing through categories, right? Etc. Right? So these events, also these triggers, could help you understand that, the user is not so sure about, finding the right item, or let's say, was not able to navigate through the menu in the right way, right? Or it could be order journey for that matter, right? The second thing that we should also look at is basically optimizing the product based on the data that's being available to you, right? Um, you could just say that, hey, X number of users are coming to, let's say, onboarding screen, but not able to create, or let's say, register an account with us, right? Uh, Now there could be multiple reasons to this, right? So technical issues, let's say, where the user is not getting an OTP, could be one of the reasons, right? But what are the other experience related issues that we could actually derive from insights, right? So are we giving a skip option to the user while onboarding, to actually show the onboarding carousels, right? Are we actually, providing very efficient onboarding form so that the users don't drop off in the middle, right? Is the language that you had written on the onboarding screen is very well communicated to the user, right? Are we asking too much of information from a user to basically, register for ourselves, etc., right? So using these insights, we could maybe optimize our onboarding screen and kind of enable, frictionless onboarding experience to the users, right? So coming to the metrics, right? So obviously, these are just some examples, right? There could be many based on product to product, and it could also differ from one product to another product. Just give me a second, folks. Sorry, yeah. Uh, so one set of metrics that I would look at is activation rate and user onboarding metrics, right? If we just dig deeper on that, measuring the percentage of users who complete certain actions, right? Let's say onboarding, right? Let's take example of Facebook, right? So Facebook want users to obviously register, right? And also to share, let's say, an image or a post or a video about what's happening in a user's life, right? Now, that could be one activation, or it's a key action that Facebook want a user has to do, right? Which is sharing content. Second thing could be, expanding the connections, right? It could be adding more friends to your network, right? The third thing could be, engaging with different cross sell products, right? It could be gaming for that matter, or it could be, let's say, having goods sold on Facebook, right? You might want to dig deep into different pages and then look at what's the value proposition of groups, or let's say pages for that matter, right? So now, what Facebook does in these scenarios is basically analyze the data, right, and see what are some of the users that are very easy to share content, or it's open to share content, etc. And how do we enable them to, let's say, adding more friends, or let's say looking at different, showing them different games that are available on Facebook, or let's say showing them the value proposition of different groups and etc. Right? Uh, there could be certain set of users who are very active in gaming, but not very active in terms of sharing content, right? Now, how can Facebook, make these users, engage more on, sharing content, or let's say, make them very active in terms of, collaboration activities, like, participating in group chats, etc. and all, right? Um, the other key set of metrics that any product growth company would look at is basically around retention and engagement, right? Let me just look at the chat. Yeah, I would share the presentation. That's not a problem, right? So, the retention and engagement metrics, right? So, and obviously, you would see in many direct consumer apps these days, right? So everybody is doing everything, right? So what do I mean by that? So you could see that many of the apps which are direct consumer facing, right? So are getting expanded to multiple business verticals, right? So if we just take Swiggy as an example, right? So before before they were just a food delivery app, right? Now they're Instamart, right? So which is basically delivering your groceries for each and every day, right? The third, they also have Genie, right? So everybody is expanding their product use cases, right? So that the user has their brand value on top of their mind. One, second, to increase the retention, right? To ask the user to come to the app, or let's say on a day-to-day basis, right? To interact with the product and then have more transaction on the app,
Raja,
right?
could you
So
please
instead
repeat?
of being
Raja, could you
a
please
monthly
repeat
active, or
what
let's say occasional app
Ra-
for a certain use case,
Raja, can you hear me?
right? So everybody wants the use case.
Raja, can you hear me? Am I audible to others?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, Raja, your voice is breaking really badly, not able to hear whatever that you're saying. So could you please your connect your laptop to some stable network, because it's not coming out well at all. So that will make you repeat the whole thing over again. So if you could just connect your laptop to some stable network.
Let, let me just try. I connected to hotspot now. Let's see how it goes.
It's
Is
better
my
now.
voice audible now?
Yeah, it's better.
I'm really sorry for this issue. Yeah. Cool. Sorry, folks. This is really bad experience that I didn't want to provide. Yeah. So one more set of metrics that we should look at is retention and engagement metrics, right? So obviously, retention means that you want user to interact with your app in a very very frequently, right? So now it's better if a user interacts with your app on a day-to-day basis, right? uh, and you wouldn't want a user to basically use your app, let's say, only at least once a time, right? So now every company is looking at ways how can we make the user come to our app on a day-to-day basis, right? Now some of the examples for this could be solve the daily use case of a user, right? In case of Swiggy, it could be ordering groceries, right? In case of fintech apps, it could be, let's say, giving a blogs or, let's say, newsletters, so that they could actually come to your app and then read your articles on a daily basis, right? So another example in fintech could be having UPI as a way to make payments from your app, right? So if you have seen recently, so many apps kind of launched UPI, even though there is no relation to their business model, right? The reason being, these fintech companies, also these companies, want a user to come to their app on each and every day basis, so that they could basically cross sell or upsell on a day-to-day basis to you, right? uh, what are some of the best practices for building a product-led organization, right? So uh, first thing that comes to my mind is basically empowering product teams. So, giving the product teams an autonomy and in their respective areas, right? It could be looking at order management funnels, or it could be onboarding, right? It could be partnering with, let's say, some external companies to provide more value proposition to the product, etc. and all, right? So one good thing in which some of the companies are kind of trying to adopt these days uh, is basically kind of have hackathon kind of a things, right? Even for product managers, right? To come up with really good and innovative ideas, right? Which can be implemented in a day or two, right? But have a huge impact on a company or it's on the product itself, right? um, the second thing that I would say is basically being very close to the customers, right? It could be in terms of providing active support to the customers, as well as uh, educating to the users about the product and then the value proposition, etc. and all, right? So one very good Indian example that I can give about this is basically Zerodha, right? So Zerodha has a huge learning portal, right? So where users could basically go and chat. Okay, again, the horse is clicking. I hope it's clear now. I'll have to talk to my internet guy today. What is happening? Uh, so yeah, Zerodha Varsity being one more good example in terms of having educating users about financial markets so that they could actually use their software in an effective way, right? So I think these were some of the things that I wanted to talk about. Product-led approach. Let me just reconnect now. Can you folks hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry. I think I'm at the end of my slides, so I think we can
Okay.
take up for questions, right? So
Yeah, sure.
share these slides so that it's much more clear. I know there has been a lot of breakage in internet on voice, etc. So I would just share these slides, but I would definitely be able to answer any questions in live. Yeah.
Okay, sure. So, like moving on with the Q&A session. So I would request everyone, if anyone has any question, they can put it in the chat box. So we can read out the question better. So I think Raja, you can see the Q&A box for the questions.
Yes, I can see. Let me just open that. I can see 4 questions. If that's the same with you, then we can just proceed, right? I think first question. So I can't see you.
Yeah.
Okay, you can hear me, right?
So like, let me read out the question. So yes, we can hear you. So based on your startup experience, what are the for evaluating startup product ideas in both B2C and B2B markets? And how does the evaluation process differ between B2C and B2B contexts? I hope like you will be able to answer it as you have experience in both B2B and B2C products. So over to you, Raja.
Satvik, can you just repeat the question, please? I can't see it on the chat.
Yeah, sure. So the question is about, like, based on your startup experience, what are the essential criteria or filters in both B2B and B2C markets for
Phil,
evaluating the startup product ideas?
got it. See, there's a major difference in a way a B2B company and B2C company works, right? A B2B company always looks at, what could be the revenue model for me if this product scales, right? Uh, and for a B2C, at the initial phase, right, it wouldn't matter much to them what's the revenue model, but their main goal would be, acquiring users, right, retaining users, or let's say engaging users on the product, and then cross-selling or upselling products, right? So a B2B company would always look at, what are the market opportunities that are available in the market for me to make a revenue out of it, rather than, making features or let's say products for just engagement or let's say retention for that matter, right? And it also depends on the phase, the kind of phase that they are in, right? Now slowly the B2B companies are also venturing into the mindset of B2C. What do I mean by that? They're also trying to, kind of have marketplaces, right, where a user could basically have external services integrated into the B2B product, so that the user finds a more value proposition than it was just before being a standalone product, right? uh, does that answer your question? If I can have follow-up questions also if it doesn't answer the question.
Thank you, Raja. So let's move on to the second question from Dorothy. So what would be the adoption metrics that you track in the initial period of adoption cycle? And what should be tracking in the long term? So it's about the adoption cycles, initial period and long-term period.
Are you talking about adoption for a feature or the product itself on this?
I think we can go with the generic because I think there is not specification. So we can go with the generic answer for the product itself.
Got it. For anybody to measure adoption, right? So the key things somebody would want to come back on is basically what is that you want a user to perform, right? What are the key actions a user has to perform, right? Now, you'd always look at this in a funnel basis, right? So what do I mean by that? If you just take, placing orders on Zomato as an example, right? Um, now you would want to look at how many users are kind of onboarding to the app, right? And how many users are successfully browsing through the restaurants, finding the restaurant they like, clicking on the menu, adding items to the cart, and then going to payment page and then ordering food, right? uh, Now, obviously, the main goal for Zomato would be to convert orders, right? But the other secondary things that Zomato would also want to measure is basically how easy for a user to search across restaurants. How easy is it to add items to the cart? How easy is it to make payments via the checkout that's there, right? So that is the reason you might have seen. So there are a lot of companies which actually kind of spend more time on, let's say, checkout, which is basically integrating with different payment instruments, let's say BNPL, UPI, saved credit cards, right? And so many innovative ways to kind of make the transaction seamless, right? I would say the key adoption metrics that I would look at is basically the key action points that I want a user to perform, right? Now, in terms of checkout, it could be what is my, checkout success rate, right? Payment success rate, right? What is the affinity towards, let's say, for a user to select the instruments, which I had shown as a suggestion to the user, right? Let's say every checkout actually shows you recommended instruments versus recommended payment types, right? What is the affinity of a user to basically use these instruments or these suggested instruments, right? What is the affinity of the user towards offers, right? Are the users kind of making more orders, or let's say has more propensity to convert an order if there are offers being shown, right? Um, Etc., etc., right? So there is no one straightforward metric. It always depends on the kind of use case or feature that you want to track, but it always depends on the key actions that you want a user to perform, right? I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Raja. Thank you for the answer. So moving on to the next question by Akshay. Akshay is asking, can you share your experience, challenging experience at CRED, which will cover most of the things in this presentation or the agendas of today's session. So any challenge that you faced at CRED that will cover today's topic mostly.
I can't go to specific examples, right? Because obviously things I'm working on is kind of I would say not so into the market yet. It is kind of a 0 to 1 product, right? To give you some overarching principles, right? So it's always just look at what's being done currently in the market, right? Let's say what is a differentiated experience that you can provide on top of the existing products that are out there, right? That's being the one. Second, how can we make it? How can we, let's say, reduce the customer steps, or let's say the steps taken by the customer in using a product, right? Or how can we optimize the product funnels that are there in the existing industry, and how can we be innovative in terms of providing a seamless payment experience, or let's say shopping experience, or or it could be paying your utility bills or anything, right?
Thank you, Raja. So, uh, a similar question from Zan, that how does CRED go about itself, that method of building an excellent user experience? So, can we talk about like how you build an excellent user experience if we talk about CRED?
Okay, two things, right? So at CRED, we actually are very fond of taking bold decisions, right? So what do we mean by that? So even though there are a lot of nuances or a lot of regulations, or let's say a lot of standard procedures that a company follows to have certain experience to be shown to the user, right? Grid takes a reverse approach of what is it actually is necessary for the user, right? And what's the actual impact does it gonna take if we actually break away from the traditional way of showing things, or let's say interacting with things, right? Um, so, and you see that across products at CRED, right? So now one thing you'd look at is basically we are focused on having very gated in users on our platform, right? But that could also kind of impact the number of users that we can target to, right? But CRED has taken this decision in a way that even though there are less number of users with me, but I know what are the customer personas that I want to solve to, right? And another strong use cases these users would actually face, right? And then only working for them rather than solving for each and every customer that is out there, right? So it's just that. So by just keeping the user at the center, right, and spending a lot of time in terms of user research, user questionnaire, right, and then coming up with actual pain points, right, um, and then kind of working around it, right? So yeah. Let's go to the next question, Swati. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Raja. Thank you for the insight. So, we got a question from Ganesh. He's asking, what would be the challenges as an individual who is starting his career as a PM, with experienced technical team, marketing, and customer relationships manager? So basically, what would be the challenges? You can, if you can share your part of the answer.
So challenges with respect to what in transitioning, or let's say being in product management, or
Yes. Just starting as, if someone is starting as a product manager.
okay. See, I think first and foremost thing that comes to my mind is alignment, right? So how do we convince our stakeholders, or let's say how do you sell your idea to your stakeholders, right? It could be your development team, it could be your sales team, or it could be your leadership team, right? So uh, until unless you are able to sell your idea and align your stakeholders, you can't work in tandem with them, right? So alignment is one of the first thing that I would say any product manager would basically face, right? Um, Now alignment could also be not be done in two ways, right? One, you have to be very effective in a way that you communicate, right? But you have a really concrete problem to solve, right? Second, you don't have a concrete problem, right? But you're able to align your stakeholders, right? So in both cases, having a good problem to solve and being able to do a groundwork on how do I convince my stakeholders with the actual problem statement, right? So that they don't need to go and dig deep and ask you, second or third order questions, right? So the way to overcome this is basically be in shoes of your technical team, right? Sales team, etc. and all, and see what are the questions that they could come up with, and try to have answers for them at the very beginning, right? If you can't do that, what you can also do is basically set up one-on-ones with heads of these particular departments and understand what is they think about this particular idea or anything. Get an initial pulse check, right? And then go back and work on those things and come back to larger audience, right? So I would say alignment is one of the first things that you would face as a product manager in any of the bigger teams, right? Second, I would say is basically execution, right? So obviously there would be sophisticated project managers that will have um, on multiple large teams, but it becomes a job of product manager to deliver outcomes, right? The way to do that is basically to catch or let's say to look at the cracking areas that are present between teams, right? And how do you glue them together, and how do you bring all of them into a particular direction so that everybody is working for the same deadline rather than having multiple priorities, right? I would say these are the two, but the third one I would say is basically, I mean, anybody starting in product management would face is basically jumping to solutions, right? Rather than spending more time on problems, right? So until unless we are very clear on problems and understood the second order, third order effects of that particular problem, right? We can't be very sure of the solution, right? But the third problem is, I think, is with every product manager that is out there. But the first two things are some of the things that you would want to get right at first to basically gain confidence from your teams.
Thank you, Raja. Thank you for the answer. So, taking the last second question, can you just like mention it in 2 or 3 lines that how can someone get into a product-led growth mindset?
Okay. First thing is keep the user at the center, right? Be in your customer shoes. Uh, Understand their pain points with respect to your product, right? And see how is your product is actually solving the customer pain point, right? Rather than just looking at user Google search, or let's say just depending on market analysis. It's also important to understand the ground reality with the customer, right? So first and foremost, I would say is basically keeping the customer at the center, right? um, the second thing I would say is basically, how do you enable your customers to gain more value proposition from your product, right? Rather than just solving for a use case, right? What do I mean by that, right? So if you are solving your product for a single problem faced by a user, right, then the user might actually use your product only for that particular single problem, right? Uh, if not, if the same problem is being solved some other company, right, but with much more broader use cases, right, but in a very less efficient way, the users might actually use a different platform. The reason being they actually get to use one single platform for all their problems, right? So first, be in customer shoes. Second, try to see how can your product solve multiple problems that a user faces, right? And try to be a destination for that, right? Let's say if you're into fintech, try to answer, or let's say address all your customer problems with respect to fintech, right, in your product, right? Or at least enable users to interact with these products from your platform, right? Etc. Right? So I would say these could be two major things that you would want to look at, right? To basically have product-led growth in your company, or let's say your product.
Thank you, Raja. Thank you for the response. So, we got a last question with us. I think there are 3 things that the audience wants to know from you. What would be some books, resources, and skills that would be required in a PM's journey if someone is starting out? So, if can you please elaborate on this?
Sure. Very. I'm not big fan of books, but I have read some books which kind of provoke my thoughts. I'm more of try to work on products and try to talk to people who are more intelligent than you and understand from them on your regular problems. rather than just looking at book and then try to implement that, right? So, but even then I found few books which are really helpful, right? So first one, I would say the mom test, right? Which would basically kind of help you in understanding, how do you talk to users, right? So how do you ask questions to the users, and how do customers kind of lie to you, right, without their own conscious mind, and how can you basically take truth from their own experience, right? The book is mostly centered around, how do you talk to users, and how to basically gain real value from user feedbacks and user research and user experiments, right? uh, I would say that's one of the books that I like. Second is basically Hooked, uh, which is again around, making your products much more engaging, right? And also kind of telling you the ways to retain your customers, right? um, so I think these are the two books I would propose, but there are so many in the market. But yeah, also I think you can also look at problem solving being one of the core skills of a product manager. Thinking fast and slow is one of the books I would also suggest for anybody to go through. Any other questions, Satvik?
Yeah, so I think Zan also asked about the resources with the books. If there are any important resources that are important for product manager if they are just starting out.
Uh, it's very important. I mean, I'll give you multifold answer, right?
Mhm.
It's very important for a product manager to basically be in touch with the regular products that are being shipped out into the market, right? So what are the new books that are coming on, right? What are the new products that are coming into market, right? So what are the flavors of different products that are coming to market? Let's say there's fintech, right? So what are the kind of different products that people are building in terms of fintech, right? um, the only way to be very on top of it is basically going through obviously the newsletters and searching for different companies that are starting up, etc. But one interesting way is basically to have sites like Product Hunt. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of, which kind of helps you in searching for different new products that are coming to the market, and helps people understand from a entrepreneur perspective why is that they are solving this problem, right? uh, and kind of helping uh, these companies to kind of pitch their product to larger audience, right? um, Second thing I would say is basically try to install all kinds of apps onto your mobile, right? Even though it's not solving your necessary use case or problem, but try to explore as many apps as possible on a week on basis or month on month basis to see what's the differentiated experience that these guys are giving, right? So what happens in most cases, let's say if we talk about wealth management apps, right? There is Grow, there is Upstocks, there are so many apps that are present there, right? So what I would suggest people doing is basically, even though there are so many companies in wealth management now, uh, then where are there companies that are coming out on each and every month, right? So there is Universe, there are so many companies that are coming onto platform on into market, right? So try to install these apps, right? Try to understand what is it they are trying to do different rather than the existing market, even though they are trying to solve the same problem, right? Then you'll actually understand the actual nuances in the market. Also, what is their take on customers, and how are they communicating the pain points to the users, and how are they providing a differentiated user journey for the same problem, right? um, so connecting people over LinkedIn, or let's say many platforms where you can directly network with people, understand what are they working on, how are they starting up, right? So what is their experience on, so right? how is your product different from other products, etc., could actually kind of help you in more ways that you can imagine, instead of just looking at books, or let's say trying to follow frameworks or anything, right?
Thank you, Raja. Thank you for your valuable insights. So I think keeping in times in our mind, everyone need to join their regular classes. So once again, thank you, Raja. Thank you for your valuable insights and presenting the session today. So with this, I mark the end of the session. Thank you all. You have been a wonderful audience. And thank you, Raja. Thank you once again.
Thank you everyone for taking time on weekend. Chill. Bye.